So in this video, we're going to take a look at some more examples of rearranging formulae. And in our first one, we have Q equals P plus A over P plus B. And we want to make P the subject. Now, P is in the denominator of a fraction. So the first thing I would do is multiply both sides by P plus B. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Q lots of P plus B is equal to P plus A. Okay, so now I've got this bracket with P involved. I'll expand that out. So PQ plus Q times B, so BQ is equal to P plus A. I have P on both sides of the equation. So let's subtract P from both sides, get all the P's on one side, and subtract BQ from both sides as well. So now we're back in that age-old position where we've got the two terms on the left-hand side, both involving P as factors. So we can factor out the P and then divide both sides by the Q minus 1. Now, if you've done this rearrangement in a slightly different order, you may well end up with an equivalent fraction, but it looks like this: BQ minus A over 1 minus Q. And all I've done to get from there to there is multiply top and bottom by minus 1. Okay? Right, next one. So, number 2, we have y equals x over 3 take away x, and we want to make x the subject. So, first of all, I've got x in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply both sides to get it out. So y times 3 take away x is equal to x. So we want to expand this bracket out because it involves the x. So 3y take away xy is equal to x. Then I want to get all the x's on one side of the equation. Now, to avoid minus signs, it probably makes sense for me to add xy to both sides. So x plus xy. And then on the right-hand side, I can factorise that. We've got the two terms, both as with x as a factor. So 1 plus y times x. And then we can divide both sides by the bracket. So I'm just going to write it this way round. X is 3y over 1 plus y. And that is my rearranged form. Again, if you look at your answer, it looks slightly different. Try multiplying top and bottom by minus 1 and see if you get the same thing as I have. It's just because you did the rearrangement in a slightly different order, that's all. So, number 3, PQ over x is equal to Q take away 3. Now, we want to make Q the subject. Now, what I would generally do in this, you can do this without doing this step that I'm going to suggest, but I think it will make your life easier. Try and get rid of fractions. In examples 1 and 2, I multiplied both sides by p plus b and 3 minus x first. Okay? Now, that was because the denominators involved the variable I was trying to isolate. Here I'm going to suggest that we multiply both sides by x. Now x is not what I want to isolate. I want to get q by itself. But it's just to avoid nasty algebraic fractions. Okay? Anytime I can get rid of fractions and make my life easier, that's to make my life easier. That will help. Okay? So I'm going to multiply both sides by x. PQ is equal to QX take away 3x. Okay? Right, now I want to isolate q. So, in order to avoid minus signs, I'm going to add the 3x to both sides and subtract the pq from both sides. So this term's going over here, the minus 3x is going over here. Okay, so now we have this. We've got the two terms on the right-hand side with q as a factor, so I can now factorise. And then I can divide both sides by the bracket, and I'll write it this way round. Q is 3x over x take away p. And I'm done with example number 3. Right, number 4. We have 3xy over 5 is equal to 2x plus 1 over 2. And we want to make x the subject. Okay, now you can see that we've got two fractions. And as we've done in the previous examples, I've got rid of the fractions by multiplying through by the denominator. That is always a good shout, okay? So I'm going to do the same here. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 5. Now, when I do that, remember when you multiply a fraction, so if you've got some fraction and you want to multiply that by 5, for example, 5 is the same as 5 over 1. And when you multiply two fractions together, we're going to get a times 5, so 5a over b times 1. So you can see that when I multiply a fraction by 5, it only affects the numerator. Okay, I multiply the numerator by 5, the denominator stays the same. And I'm going to do precisely the same here. So multiplying both sides by 5, I'm going to get 3xy is equal to 5 lots of the numerator. So that'd be 10x plus 5, and that's over 2. Now I'm going to multiply both sides by the 2. Gets rid of this denominator as well. So easily 3xy times 2 is just going to be 6xy. That's 10x plus 5. Okay, we want to make x the subject, remember? So I'm going to take 10x from both sides, get all the x's onto the left-hand side. Then I can factorise that left-hand side. Now, 6 and 10 have a common factor of 2. So you could factor 2 out as well here. I'm not going to bother doing that. I'm just going to factor the x out. And then I could divide through by the bracket. Okay, now if you had factored the 2 out, you could do it now if you wished. And you would have that.